Hi guys, today I thought I would show you all of the classic books that I've collected since I joined BookTube last January. All of these were bought secondhand or were gifts, and even the gifts were bought secondhand, some of them I'm pretty sure. So hopefully you enjoy. It's a little bit of a bookshelf tour, a little bit of a showcase, I don't really know what to call it, but if you do enjoy, please leave a like and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy the video. Well, just a warning, but I'm basically going to be guessing what a lot of these books are about because I like going to books pretty blind, so if that annoys you, then you should probably just click off because I'm definitely going to make up quite a lot, and if you've read a book before, you're going to be like, he does not know what he's talking about, but it's because I generally like to go into books kind of not knowing that much about them. Also, I got these new lights and I'm trying them out in the background of the video, so let me know if you like it or not, because I'm not sure. So I'm going to start with my Penguin Classics. This is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, and I have read this at the start of last year. I didn't actually love it, but I definitely want to reread it in the future just to see if I enjoy it more the second time around, because I really enjoyed the plot, but I couldn't really get into Oscar Wilde's writing. Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift I have not read. This is about a man who lands on an island full of little miniature people, and that's all I know about it, but I definitely do want to read this in the future. It's not too long, and I think it sounds quite exciting. Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson, I honestly have no idea what this is about. I know it's set in Scotland, and I don't actually have any immediate plans to read it, but from the back of the book, it sounds like it's about someone who gets kidnapped, obviously, and that's pretty much all I know. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson as well. I have read this one. I thought it was okay. It wasn't amazing. It's set in Edinburgh. It's about a scientist who somehow creates himself into a kind of monster. He has like split personalities. It's kind of weird. It was okay. It wasn't a favourite. The Monk by Matthew Lewis. I started this and I was actually really excited to start it, because I heard that it was really gory and really provocative, but I thought the writing style was so difficult to get into. It was written in the 1700s, I believe, and I really struggled with it. So I definitely want to try it again in the future, but it was definitely a hard read. A Hero of Our Time by Michael Lermontov, perhaps? I haven't read this either. I don't really know much about it. I think it's about a man that goes on a journey and just develops as a person. Again, not really sure. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey. If you watched my last video, my worst classics, which got 4 dislikes, and it's definitely just because I said that this was one of my least favourites. This is about a man who goes into a mental hospital and disrupts it, pretty much. I really am not a fan of this book. The Odyssey by Homer is about Greek gods and was written like 2,000 years ago. And I definitely do want to read it. It sounds really interesting, but I'm kind of intimidated by it, I'm not going to lie. Notes from Underground and the Double by Fyodor Dostoevsky was a gift from Kevin at Storyglyph, and I read the Notes from Underground, I didn't read the Double, and that was basically about a man who thinks he's beneath society and kind of ruins his own life. It was kind of interesting. I didn't love it, but it was definitely an interesting read. Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky as well is about a prostitute and a man who has basically given up on life and is a murderer, and that's all I know. I don't actually plan on reading this. I only bought it because it was like £1 and it's really thick. I'm kind of intimidated by it as well. The Old Curiosity Shop by Charles Dickens is about a girl and her grandfather who live and work in the shop from the title, but are kicked out because they can't pay their rent any longer, and they're put into a world of danger, and that's all I know as well. A lot of these books that I haven't read, I don't really know much about, obviously, so that's the best I can say. I definitely do want to get to this. I think it sounds quite interesting, and I want to read more Charles Dickens this year, definitely. Next I have these Penguin Modern Classics, and A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess is about a world where gangs basically rule the streets, like teenage gangs, and the protagonist of the story, Alex, is taken to a facility to treat him to stop him being so violent and see the errors of his ways. The Crucible by Arthur Miller. I read this back in high school and I definitely want to reread it. It's about the Salem witch trials, and is a parallel with McCarthyism that was going on in America at the time this was written, and I enjoyed it back in school, but I definitely want to reread it just in my own time to see if it stands out in my memory. The Clergyman's Daughter by George Orwell I have not read, but as far as I'm aware, it's about a girl who loses her memory and becomes unemployed and homeless in London and has to survive in the world. That might be wrong, but that's what I think it's about. Next, I have these Penguin popular classics. So, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, I have read, and I didn't love it. I honestly don't think Jane Austen is a classic author for me, which is very sad because I want her to be. However, I didn't love Pride and Prejudice. I barely remember what it's about. It's about sisters who their only goal in life basically is to get married because they cannot inherit their father's land and fortune, etc. So the book follows them trying to get husbands and the hijinks that ensue doing that. Persuasion by Jane Austen, I just finished last week, I think it was. So I'll be talking about it in my February wrap up. But I really didn't love this book either. It's about Anne who, when she was younger, rejected the proposal for marriage from a man and has regretted it ever since. And then I think it's like 10 years later, he comes back into her life. And yeah, it was okay. Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen I have not read, and honestly I don't know what the difference is really between this and Pride and Prejudice because I read the back and it sounds very similar. It's like about sisters again who are trying to get into society and get married, and yeah, I'm not in any rush to read this, to be honest. The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte, I talked about this in my January wrap up. I really enjoyed this book. It didn't beat Jane Eyre or Wuthering Heights for me, but it was really, really good in its own right. This is about a woman who has fled an abusive husband and is hiding in Wildfell Hall, and her secrets are kind of exposed, and it was just very good. I really enjoyed it. The Last of the Mohicans by James Fenimore Cooper, I have not read, and as far as I'm aware, it's about the daughters of a Englishman, maybe, who is invading, or, whatever you want to say, the US, and they come across different tribes, and that's all I know. I'm not in any rush to read this. It honestly doesn't sound that interesting to me at all. Great Expectations by Charles Dickens is the life of a young boy, Pip, from childhood right up until adulthood, as he starts off very, very poor and becomes wealthy, and you follow him and how he changes, and it's actually really good. I really enjoyed this book. I think I read it back in November or December, but yeah, I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it because it started off a little bit, not boring, but just not my favourite, but I really picked up and I highly recommend it. Martin Chuzzlewit by Charles Dickens, I have not read, but as far as I'm aware, it is about an old man who is very selfish and greedy and disinherits his family, basically just, I don't even know, to keep money for himself. Maybe dead, I have no idea. And the back of the book says that it leads to treason and blackmail and murder, so I think that sounds quite exciting and I'm excited to get to it eventually. Adam Bidet, I think that's how you say it, don't quote me on that, by George Eliot is a kind of tragic love story from what I know. I have not read this and I wasn't really planning on it, but I just read the back again there to remind myself and it actually sounds kind of interesting. George Eliot is actually a female as well, which I did not know. The Return of the Native by Thomas Hardy, I have not read this either, but it is about a man who must decide between marrying two women, and it follows one of these women. That's all I know, and I think it sounds okay. Rob Roy by Sir Walter Scott is about a man who discovers that someone is planning to destroy his family, so he travels to Scotland to meet the outlaw Rob Roy for help. It's set in 1715, and I think it sounds okay. I'm not in any rush to get to it, but I definitely do want to read it one day. Barchester Towers by Anthony Trollope, I have not read this either, and all I know about it is that it is about two people fighting to become head of the church. And that may be wrong, but again, I haven't read it, so I don't know. And I don't think it sounds that interesting, honestly. These Wordsworth classics are kind of ugly, and I'm so sad that Jane Eyre is in this edition because it's my favourite book ever. It is about Jane Eyre, a young girl who grows up very poor and then goes to work in a house for Mr. Rochester, and they fall in love, kind of. Yes, they do, that's a spoiler, but it's amazing, and definitely pick it up. Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne, I have not read. This is a very well-known classic though. It's basically just about a man who goes around the world in a hot air balloon, and that's all I know about it, but I definitely do want to pick up at some point because I think it sounds really interesting. The Mill and the Floss by George Eliot, I have not read this, and I think it is about a woman who falls out with her brother because they want to live very different lives, but they live together. I'm not sure, and that's all I know. Next, I have all of the Narnia books by C.S. Lewis, and I have an entire video where I talk about every single one of these in depth, so definitely go and check that out on my channel. I'll try and link it in the description. This big collection of Mark Twain stories was a Christmas present, and I absolutely love it. I think it's so nice looking. It has like gold edges, and I definitely want to get into it soon, especially Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. I also have these editions, but I'm going to unhaul these because I don't need them anymore. Okay, we're going into like speed round now. So Catch-22, I DNF'd this last year because I thought it was kind of boring. It's about a man in the army who, every time he tries to leave, something else happens that they like change the rules so he can't leave. And I thought it was kind of boring. This is books 9 and 10 of Paradise Lost by John Milton. I bought this not realising that it was only part of the book. This is about the Garden of Eden and the rise of Satan and all sorts of religious stuff. The Lost Domain by Alain Fournier is a French book about a man growing between boyhood and manhood and dealing with life. That's all I know. To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee is amazing. This was one of the first books I read when I started BookTube, and it is about a young girl whose father is trying to get a black man acquitted. Is that the word? He's trying to prove that the black man is innocent for a crime against a white woman, and it is amazing and a must read. The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. I absolutely love this book as well. I think it was his very first book that I read in January 2019, before I'd even started my BookTube channel, and it is about a young boy kind of dealing with growing up and coming to terms with the adult world. Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I really enjoyed this as well. It's the classic story of Dr. Frankenstein who creates the perfect man, but it goes wrong and he creates what we know as Frankenstein's monster. Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll and also Through the Looking Glass is my favourite children's book ever, and it is about Alice who goes to Wonderland by falling down a rabbit hole and has lots of crazy adventures. A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens is about a group of men caught up in the French Revolution, and I have not read this. The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald is about a very rich man who falls in love with a woman who is already married. I've also just realised that these actually match. I never noticed that before. The Mayor of Casterbridge by Thomas Hardy. I have no idea what this is about. The back of the book tells me literally nothing at all, so I can't give you any information. This is a collection of short stories and poems by Edgar Allan Poe, and I actually did read some of these this month, so I will be talking about them in my February wrap-up, so look out for that. The Diary of Anne Frank is the real-life non-fiction diary of Anne Frank, who was a Jew hiding in an attic during World War II. This is a collection of short stories by Charles Dickens, all about ghosts, and I just realised that this also matches these two as well, and I don't know why I have never noticed that before. American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis is about Patrick Bateman, a very rich man in New York City who goes crazy and kills people, but did he actually? We don't know. It's all very up in the air, and it's very good. I really enjoyed this book, but I haven't read it for a few years, so I definitely want to reread it soon. The Awakening by Kate Chopin is about a woman who decides that she no longer wants to live her life as a mother and wife and just wants to be free. And this was a gift from my friend Grana, who I met when I was studying abroad, and I absolutely loved it. I think I talk about it in my December wrap up, I'm not too sure. East of Eden by John Steinbeck is a multi-generational story that follows like 3 generations of a family and the decisions that they make and how it affects the next generation and the previous, and they're all interconnected, and it's very, very good. And this was a gift from Kevin at Storyglyph again, and I absolutely loved it, and this edition is beautiful as well. This is a collection of short stories, and well, I think the Call of Cthulhu is a longer one, but they're all by H.P. Lovecraft, and this was a gift from my parents at Christmas, and I think it's really, really nice, this cover. Apparently it's a 3D cover. I just checked and there's no 3D glasses in this anymore though. Wuthering Heights is my second favourite book ever, but I really struggle to describe what it's about. It's also a multi-generational story featuring 2 different families, and it's kind of a tragic, gothic, kind of love story, kind of not. It's absolutely amazing, and you should read it for sure. Dracula by Bram Stoker. I need to read this year. I really, really want to read it, but for some reason I just never do. So this year I for sure have to pick it up. I feel like everyone knows what Dracula's about. He's a vampire, and I really want to read this sooner rather than later. This is just another edition of Sense and Sensibility. This one's so much nicer, and it makes me sad that I don't actually love Jane Austen, but I definitely do want to read this still, especially this edition. Little Dorrit by Charles Dickens. I have no idea what this is about, and yet again, the back of the book literally doesn't tell you anything. It says, a world of prisons, real and metaphysical, in which reality itself is imprisoned by appearances. Sounds kind of interesting, but I'll definitely have to look up some more information about it. The Bleak House by Charles Dickens. I, again, don't know anything about it, but the back of the book says it's about the High Court and legal drama, and I think that sounds kind of different from other Charles Dickens stories, and I just realised that this edition matches this, so I really don't even know what books I own anymore. Lastly, I don't know if these are really considered classics, but I have these science fiction classics, and I have no idea about any of them, but I definitely do want to try a few out, especially George R.R. Martin. So hopefully that was kind of interesting. I feel like it was a little bit boring, but I really tried my best to, give you a basic outline of what I thought the plots were. Like I said at the start, I definitely made some up, because a lot of them, I basically just picked them up because I'd be like, oh, that's a classic, I'll just get it because it's cheap. And I don't really know much about them until I actually start reading them. So if you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe and all the usual stuff, and let me know if you have these classics, etc. Just chat with me in the comments below, and I will see you later.